Hello and welcome to the Teaching Together podcast, where we celebrate and share the glows and grows of teacher life. I'm Sierra.
And I'm Grace.
Each episode, we like to share a glow or grow from our classroom or our teaching experience. We're a few weeks into term 2 here in New South Wales, and we have been reflecting on our school holidays and how they've just been such a glow in terms of time to rest and recover, but also feeling like grateful for the time to come into term 2 without a massive to-do list. Just having had some time to get on top of some marking and reporting is something that I have been really grateful for.
It's been a really positive start to the term, and I've kind of settled back in pretty well, which is good. I mean, you get back to school and it feels like you never left. I did find that over the holidays, I just found it really difficult to switch my brain off, and I'm sure there are lots of teachers listening right now who are going, yep, 100%. So I kind of didn't feel as well rested as I'd hoped, but getting back into the swing of things and that kind of thing really helped, and I'm doing what I love, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, last episode was a little bit different for Teaching Together. We had a very special guest episode with Dr. Shyam Bar. He has done a lot of research into self-regulated learning and what makes a self-regulated learner and how we as teachers can be supporting our students to sort of manage their learning independently. Self-regulated learning doesn't mean that we're saying that teachers aren't important, but it's taking the focus away from, say, memorizing content and actually using our content as a vehicle to build students into good learners. Because regardless of where they head in their future, when they're finished in their classroom, they're going to go out into the big wide world and they're going to have to learn other things. And so it's really, really important for us to see our role not just as teachers of the syllabus in whatever state it is that you work in, but also as teachers of learning. And so I just loved that episode. Shyam had lots of fabulous strategies and things to share that you could take into your classroom and implement tomorrow. So if you haven't listened to it, make sure that you go back and check it out. He also has a podcast called Educate to Self-Regulate, and it's got lots of bite-sized episodes with different strategies and tips for how you can improve and implement self-regulated learning in your classroom. So you might want to go and check that out.
On this episode, we are diving into something that could potentially be controversial, depending on how you look at it. We're looking at AI in the classroom and how we as teachers can use it, how students use it. We did a bit of research into some different educational contexts, and there are lots of different attitudes that teachers have about AI. And so I'm actually pretty excited to get into this because spoiler alert, I find AI super useful. But first, it's time for tea.
Today I'm trying a tropical tea from the Red Seal Fruity Tea pack that I mentioned a few episodes ago. The reason I bought that pack is because the peach and pineapple tea you can't seem to buy on its own anymore. So I'm trying this tropical tea. Actually says that it would be good for a hot or cold brew, and I'm going to say it would be more appropriate as a cold brew.
Yeah, when you got me to smell it, I was like, that was a thought I had. I thought, maybe it might be better cold.
Yeah, like I'm thinking, like peachy tropical iced teas. I mean, you don't like iced tea, and I'm not a huge fan either, but I think it would be far more suited as a cold brew. But anyway, I'll endure it for now because it's cool and it's keeping me warm.
As all tea should do. And I am having a classic Blue Mountain, which I'm pretty sure I've mentioned on the podcast before, from T2, which is essentially a more florally version of an Earl Grey. And it's getting a bit colder now in New South Wales, which is very exciting because I do love winter and it's a great autumn tea. So I am really enjoying that at the moment. So in our research into AI for this episode, we found a study from The Educator, which is an Australian publication, that found that 60% of teachers surveyed said they were concerned about the ethical implications of AI. And there are definitely ethical implications. I think the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of teachers is plagiarism and other forms of cheating. But what we really wanted to do in today's episode is have a look at some of the positive uses of AI and some practical strategies for making the most of these tools that we now have at our disposal, as well as addressing some of the concerns that teachers might have about plagiarism and cheating and general ethics of AI, and because it's very new. And we kind of have created, as humanity, we've created this beast that has kind of overtaken us almost like a Frankenstein's monster. And we're not entirely sure what to do with it. The possibilities are endless, and you can kind of do with it whatever you want. But there is a point where you say, okay, when do we stop? What is a positive thing to do with this? Where do we draw the line? And we're going to talk about that today. But I just wanted to front this conversation by saying that I really enjoy using AI in the classroom. And I think it can be really valuable if you are confident in using it well and your students are confident using it well. As a kindergarten teacher, my students aren't using AI basically at all. It's more on my end with preparation and stuff like that. But I really have found it really valuable. We'll get into more detail about that later, and we'll actually give you some of our favorite AI tools and how we specifically use them, because there are so many for teachers. But yeah, I think AI is great, but we need to treat it carefully.
100%. I think in terms of planning and preparation, it really has the capacity to alleviate some of the grunt work that teachers have to do in terms of coming up with stuff, coming up with ideas, examples, activities. I think it has a really broad capacity, especially some of the specific teaching tools that we'll get into in a little while. One of the articles that we were reading, put out by Sydney University quite recently, 2023, focused on how AI can be used meaningfully by teachers and students. And I think, again, that meaningful aspect of it really comes down to how well do you understand its capabilities and what you can ask it to do.
Because it's a tool. It's like a hammer, but a hammer is just way more basic. So much more basic. But it's a tool. And I think my mum was the first person I heard say this, a computer is only as smart as the person using it. You need to know how to use it.
Yeah. I think one of the big things that it kind of annoys me when teachers are having a bit of a meltdown about AI is that, how was this different when the internet first came out? Surely people were panicking about copying and pasting and plagiarism and, kids aren't going to learn properly when they have access to all this information. All those same arguments would have been happening then, 20 something years ago when the internet was first kind of becoming common in schools. I don't remember going to school without the internet.
No, I didn't.
But it wouldn't have been as readily available as it is now. I've got students who are just on the internet all the time. When I wanted the internet at school, it was you had to book in to use the internet.
Exactly. You booked the computer lab as a class, and we had library as a class where we learned how to use computers. Exactly. And they were super clunky Dell desktops with square monitors, and smartphones weren't really a thing. Yeah, I love that we've actually been able to see over our very short lifetimes the evolution specifically of computer technology.
I also think that people like ourselves who just sort of happened to hit the sweet spot in terms of technology. So we weren't so far into our adult lives without it that it was a real challenge to learn how to use it well. But we weren't so far into our, say, adolescence with internet being around that we would call ourselves, I wouldn't say that I'm a digital native. Some of the students that I teach now that have literally had iPads in their hands since they were toddlers, they are digital natives and they are actually not good at problem solving around computers and technology, whereas we had to teach ourselves how to use it. And so we're in this weird sweet spot where, we haven't just grown up so familiar with it that now we sort of don't really know what to do when it goes wrong.
Yeah, because everything has been changing so quickly in the time that we've been, cognizant of the world and technology, that we're kind of used to just new stuff happening all the time. But you're right. When I would take casual classes in high school or in middle school, I would have teenagers completely freaking out because they didn't know how to use PowerPoint properly or whatever. They didn't know how to share a document to their teacher's email. And I was so flummoxed. I was like, surely you guys know how to do this, right? But you're right, because they didn't have to teach themselves how to use it. They actually don't know a lot of stuff.
Back to meaningful use of AI, right? It's the same sort of thing. I think if we have people just either ignoring it and pretending that it doesn't exist, or not investing the time in problem solving and working it out, then there's going to be problems on sort of either end. I remember when I was in high school, my science teacher said to us that, everyone at school said you weren't allowed to use Wikipedia.
Yes.
Right? Because Wikipedia can be written by anybody and it's untrustworthy and whatever. Our science teacher said to us, go and look at Wikipedia, but you use it as a springboard.
Exactly.
And when you read, whatever it says, you then take that piece of information and you've got something to go and search now.
Yes.
And then you may find that it's wrong. But if 3 or 4 other sites actually give you the evidence to say why that thing is true, then, that's great. And you might find the same piece of information, but on more reputable sources. But there's nothing worse than sitting there and Google and just typing in, I don't know, something really broad, or when you don't actually know what to search.
Exactly.
Wikipedia used to be that springboard for us. And now, AI can do a similar thing.
One of the other uses of AI that I found in an article by Forbes, so it's an American context, but it was really helpful actually, and it seemed to be quite similar to attitudes that Australian teachers have. But in this Forbes article, they surveyed 500 teachers just last year, and most of them said that using AI really helped increase engagement in lessons, because they're more quote unquote fun if you're using a game or if you turn on the smart board and we're using a website or whatever. And that's what this survey found, that teachers were comfortable using it as a separate thing. They weren't quite integrating it into their planning as such. It was, now we're going to use this game. And so it wasn't quite as integrated as potentially it could be, and as I would like to use it, because I use AI for planning and whatnot. But yeah, it was its own separate thing. Related, in the Australian context, the article from The Educator surveyed 250 Australian teachers, so not a huge sample size, but 58% of the teachers surveyed reported that it increased student engagement. Jumping into some potential concerns that you might have about AI, I think the key to addressing all of those is to educate yourself about what AI is. I know from our research that one of the top concerns that teachers have across the board is abuses of AI in terms of plagiarizing, deep fakes, which if you don't know what a deep fake is, it's basically just something that is AI generated that looks real. Hopefully the students that we're dealing with aren't creating deep fakes on the reg. But in terms of plagiarism and cheating and biases, my key understanding is about addressing our concerns with AI is that it's just part of teaching digital literacy, which we've had to do for a couple of decades now as the internet has become a thing. And like Sierra was saying before, we had concerns about copy and paste and all that sort of stuff. And that's still a concern, but we have adapted to address those and created some guards against that. And like when I was on my most recent and my final placement for my teaching degree, I was teaching some high school English students about how to spot bias in like newspaper articles and things like that, which is a staple of high school English in like year 7 and 8. And that's the kind of thing that we need to be teaching students in regards to AI as well. Like, how do you spot a dodgy source? And how do you spot a deep fake? We just need to be teaching our students to be critical thinkers, which also goes back to what Sarah was saying at the very beginning, that we want to be teaching not just content, we're teaching whole individuals. I would hope that in doing so, you would be able to arm students with the idea that AI is not their personal assistant to get all their learning done. It can't learn for them. And I think at the heart of these concerns about plagiarism and ethics and cheating and all that kind of thing is that students want the easy way out. They just want to get their work done. And that goes to the heart of what your teaching philosophy is at your school, or you as a teacher, what you believe about the purpose of teaching. and the kind of people that you're training your students to be. And we want them to be students who want to use AI to further their own learning, but they're still the active agents. We don't want them to, quote unquote, outsource their tasks to AI. We want them to use it as just another reference, essentially. And that speaks to a deeper ingrained belief about the purpose of education that you are communicating to your students every day, whether you say that or not.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite tools that I refer to really regularly is called EduAid AI. So it's the educator's aid. Look, it's got some fantastic tools. I particularly use it for its planning tools and its information objects. It's kind of broken down into lots of different categories. There's also a tab for independent practice where you could pop in a prompt and it will give you an extension worksheet or an essay outline or, like a scaffold for a claim evidence reasoning activity. Lots of different things that you can get it to generate for you to give to your students for their own independent practice. There's also a cooperative learning tab, ideas for jigsaw activities, debates, film projects. There's heaps of stuff. It's also got a gamification tab, which I really like. So you could take a topic or a concept that you've taught and it'll generate it into, an escape room or a bingo style activity.
Escape rooms.
Yeah. We used bingo activities heaps in year 12.
I was about to say we use them in kindergarten.
Yeah, so it will generate those sorts of things for you if you'd like. You can also select the subject and grade, which I think is really helpful because it obviously gives it some insight into the complexity of the content that it generates for you. Like I said, mostly I use it for its planning tools. I really like, it's got this thing called a lesson seed. So you click on lesson seed and you can pop in your topic or keywords down the bottom. So sometimes if I've got a really wacky syllabus point, you know how sometimes they are just abstract and it's hard to know what sort of concrete examples or teaching strategies you might use to address that. And it feels like it sits so outside of everything else in that sort of topic. I really like the lesson seed tool. I can literally just copy and paste the syllabus point into the prompt box and add it to my workspace and see what it gives me. Usually what happens is it gives you kind of like an opening and a middle and an end of your lesson. And I'll see one or two of those things that I really love and the rest of it I hate. And I think, no, that's absolutely not what I would do. But now that I've seen that, I know what I want to do. And it is just that initial trying to figure out, where do I go with this really obscure idea? What are some examples of how I could teach this? So I love that. It's also got, learning objective and success criteria tools to help you write those sorts of things quickly. The other part of it that I love, which I don't use super often, but I have played around with it, is that it has a feedback bot. So you can copy and paste a student's response into this bot. Then you can ask it, it will give you 4 different kinds of feedback options. So it can just correct spelling and grammar. It can give you feedback on, feedback. It doesn't correct it for you. It gives you feedback on spelling and grammar, gives you feedback on the mechanics of writing. It can give you feedback on the logic and the reasoning in the writing, or you can generate custom feedback or upload your own rubric. The first time I did this, I had already marked the question and then I also put it into here. And the feedback that it gave was very similar to what I had said, but just went above and beyond what I had done in terms of giving the student more ideas of examples they could have included to strengthen their response and those sorts of things, which I just thought was fantastic. I would use the feedback bot for draft responses. I wouldn't use it as a substitute for me marking my students' actual assessment tasks, but for drafts and things where you have students submitting essays or sample extended response questions, I think that's a winner. And even teaching them to use it to get feedback on their spelling and grammar and mechanics of writing, which is what I did with my year 12s. I probably wouldn't show all my students how to use AI to mark their own work, but again, teaching them what resources they have available and how to manage their resources is what is going to help them become, more independent in their learning.
I wanted to jump in because I have played around with Eduaid because Sierra did recommend it to me a while ago. And I literally today clicked on the assistant tab. My mind has been blown, guys. It's amazing. It is literally a personal assistant for all of the grunt work that you probably really hate doing, but is part of being a teacher. Kind of the admin stuff that you just kind of need to generate. It's got 3 tabs under the teaching assistant: professional duties, accessibility, and wellness. Some of the things that Eduaid can do for you are draft an email outline, which ChatGPT can do, but this is in an educational context. It can write you a class announcement. It can give you some ideas for report comments, which I also wouldn't just copy and paste because I've just had a look at some of them and they're obviously quite general, depending on the prompt that you give Eduaid, because you can put in topics and keywords and whatnot. But it does give you different types of vocab you could use for students needing improvement, students who are in progress, or exceptional students. It gives you a newsletter outline. It gives you a casual day plan kind of layout, which is very basic, but at the bottom, it gave some assignment ideas for my topic that I just randomly chucked in was in kindergarten, students can identify and write whole numbers up to 20, which is what we're doing. And it gave me 5 different activities that you could probably do in a rotation kind of context, which was actually super useful. It can give you team building activities. It can give you mindfulness activities and icebreakers and empathy prompts to facilitate discussions that lead to more meaningful relationships. And I am blown away. You can customize even this tab by grade. So the language will change depending on the students that you're targeting. But I just thought this was super helpful. Like, this is some of the stuff that I would go to ChatGPT for. But because it's specifically for an education context, the vocab will be much more useful. The quality of the final product depends on the input that you give it. So literally, I was literally just playing with this, and the topic or keyword that I gave it was numbers up to 20. You can press the wonderful enhance button and it will make that prompt more detailed for itself, but it only works up to a point. So again, this is when you need to kind of know what you want to get out of it and then tailor what you put in. But I just really wanted to highlight all these wonderful labor-saving devices that are on this wonderful website that you can access for free. You can upgrade to Eduaid Pro, but I haven't done that, and I'm looking at all these wonderful things, and I'm thinking I would actually use these. So if you want to have a play, you can create a free account on Eduaid. You just need an email address. But I highly recommend just having a play around, potentially with a unit that you're not confident with or wanting to upgrade or update, or that maybe there's a tricky email that you just need to maybe take some of the emotion out of without sounding like an actual robot. Use Eduaid. It's so fun for me to play around and think, oh, I could actually use this maybe. Yeah, I just love that there's an admin side to Eduaid as well as generating some lesson seeds and that kind of thing, which was just really cool.
Oh, it's honestly fabulous. Look, Magic School is another one that we love. It's got many, many similar features, so I'm not going to go through all of them. But one thing that they've added recently that I think is fabulous is they've got Magic School, which has much of the same teacher tools. Some of the ones that stand out to me that are a little bit different is you can paste in a YouTube video link and it will generate questions to go with that video.
That is amazing.
Yeah, there are lots of great things. It also, when it's got the exemplar tool, it's got also a non-exemplar. So it'll show you like this is what it is and this is what it isn't.
Yeah.
Which is great. This has also got the option where you can paste in a text and it will simplify it. So perhaps I find a really excellent website and I want to take the text from that website and make it informative for, a 12-year-old audience rather than an adult audience. It'll do things like that. It's excellent, and both are worth you creating free accounts and having an explore. The one thing I've seen on Magic School now I haven't seen before, it's now got this tab called Magic Student. So the idea is that now it's also got tools that are to support the students rather than tools that just support the teacher. One of the things it's got here is it's called 5 questions. And so you click on that and it'll say, get AI to ask 5 questions to push your creativity and deepen your thinking on a topic. So even when a student has writer's block or sort of doesn't know what to do, it could get this little chatbot to interact with it to get it pushing its creativity. Idea generators.
Expand on my idea. Joke creator.
Yeah.
Sentence starters. That is so helpful. That's the kind of thing AI is good for.
Yeah. So I love this. Magic School, EduAid. They're the 2 really big ones with heaps and heaps of tools. You could spend hours sifting through all this and deciding what you could use it for. If we have a look at some of our other favorites, ChatGPT we've already talked about. I think ChatGPT has lots of great potential. One of the best things I think I've used it for is when I was teaching my design students about ethics in design. I asked it to generate for me a list of ethical, factors or considerations that designers need to maintain. So it put together this big list. I asked it to then put it in a table, and then I copied and pasted that table into a blank Word document and added some extra columns. One column was where my students had to rate what they thought was the most important of those factors, basically. So they had to arrange them in an order, which ChatGPT hadn't done for me. It just spat out, here's some things that designers should think about. And then I had another column for examples. So for each factor that ChatGPT generated, my students had to then go and find an example, like a real world example of where a designer had maybe prioritized that consideration in their product. To me, that's fabulous because you don't want your students to just know the what. You want them to be able to have examples and to be able to elaborate and really get to the guts of explaining something. And so by asking ChatGPT to basically identify the what, I could then prioritize my lesson on examples. Now go and look around you and see where you can see this happening, rather than me, say, getting them to write all those definitions or factors down in the first place. And then maybe we don't have time for them to go and do the examples. And that's really where the depth of their understanding comes from. So for me, it's those kinds of things that ChatGPT can be valuable for.
Yeah. If you haven't heard of Pi, P-I, that's basically the same thing as ChatGPT. It just has a different aesthetic. And it's a little bit creepy because it kind of advertises itself as like a friend that you can chat with about whatever you want. And it's like, that's weird. I don't want a robot friend. But we have used Pi and ChatGPT in our programming, in our collaboration time that we get every week at school. So I'm thinking about myself and the 3 other kindergarten teachers. When we are trying to write generalizations for our inquiry-based units. So these are kind of the big ideas that we want students to eventually reach, which might be that we understand that we can use numbers to represent ourselves in our community, which I think was kind of what we were doing last term. The thing is, these are difficult to generate because we need to use at least 2 different concepts. So it might be identity and community, or identity and change, or whatever, and then link it to the curriculum area, so maths, for example. And it just gets really confusing. And there are also some what we call no-no verbs, so things like is, has, impacts, influences, because they're at the same time vague and limiting. So we have used ChatGPT and Pi to we will give it a prompt. Can you give me a 1-sentence generalization that connects all of these different mathematical concepts under the kind of umbrella of identity? and it will give like 5 or so. Often they're all terrible, but more often than not, we will see some phrases or some key words and just think, yes, that's what we want to focus on. And then we, the humans who know the students that we're programming for, and we know our context and we're all professionals and all that stuff, we can then use that springboard again to make these generalizations more specific to the program that we're writing. So we start using ChatGPT or Pi, and they do generate very similar prompts as well. So it's kind of just a matter of preference of which one you use. They're both large language models. They're both chatbots essentially. But we use it just to get us started, maybe articulate what we're trying to say in a more succinct way. What's hard is getting it to talk to kindergarten students, because the generalizations are supposed to be in the vocabulary of the students, which we as adults who teach these kids actually find difficult. But sometimes the large language models aren't quite there yet in articulating things in terms that 5-year-olds can understand. They love to use metaphors. Like everything is a bridge that connects other things to other things. And it's like, that's not really helpful. I haven't actually tried it for older age groups. And I'm wondering if potentially, because lots of like 5-year-olds typically aren't generating a lot of content on the internet, a lot of written content anyway. I'm wondering if I asked it to kind of voice it for a higher grade, if it would be a little bit more successful, because it just has more content to kind of base that on. But anyway, that's a way that we use it, and we use it in our staff meetings. And in part of our professional development, the wonderful lady who came to speak to us was like, use ChatGPT. Like, here's how I use it. Tell me the kinds of prompts that you got from it and how you use them to then generate these generalizations. So it can be really, really helpful.
The last 2 tools that we wanted to briefly mention are not specifically AI tools, but they are teaching tools that have AI features now. The first one is quizzes. So I never know how to actually say this, but it's spelt like quiz with an extra IZ at the end.
Yeah, I always say quizzes. Like it's such an obnoxious name to try and say.
Really emphasizing the is at the end. But anyway, quizzes. Look, I love quizzes. I don't use it as much now teaching D&T as I did when I was teaching science, but it is the superior version of Kahoot, in my opinion.
Yes.
Okay, so what I love about it is that it's essentially a Kahoot. Get a game code and the kids sign in and then it goes through a quiz. But you get this like leaderboard thing on the main screen rather than the questions coming up on on the main screen. And what I find really, really, really helpful about it is that on the top of the leaderboard, it will show you the sort of overall percentage accuracy that the whole class is getting on the quiz, which I find really cool because under an explicit direct instruction model, not that I necessarily fully adhere to everything of that, but you are aiming for 80% accuracy across the whole class on a particular topic. If you're getting less than 80% accuracy when you're doing like a check for understanding, then you need to reteach the concept. So for me, when I'm looking at the leaderboard and it's showing me, the class is getting, 87, 88% accuracy across all, say, 20 questions, that's a good indicator for me, not the only indicator, but a helpful indicator to say, hey, they have grasped the concepts that are covered in this quiz. If the whole class was getting like 50% accuracy, then that would be a signal to me that, hey, we need to go over some extra stuff here. So I love quizzes. It gives you just much better data, and it does give you a question by question breakdown of how the students went. So it shows you the overall accuracy, but then you could also check the accuracy for individual questions as well. I also love that when the students get to the end of the quiz, there's an opportunity for them to review, and it will take them back to the questions that they got wrong. And, they can actually rehash that kind of like Quizlet, where we'll go into a flashcard mode and test them on those particular questions. I just think that's great.
Yeah.
A far better teaching tool than Kahoot,
Yes.
but still with the fun gamification kind of vibe that Kahoot brings. It also has fabulous elevator music that plays in the background that I adore.
Also, you mentioned Quizlet. I just have to jump in because my year 10 commerce teacher and then my year 11, 12 economics teacher used to love Quizlet. We would get drilled on all the different vocab that we needed to learn from the textbook chapter. It was very much explicit direct instruction, just kind of exclusively. But I hear the word Quizlet and I always think that quiz is Quizlet, but it's not. They're different.
They are different.
But I hear Quizlet and I just think, oh, Mr. Hart from my year 9, 10, 11, 12 economics commerce experience. Just great. Shout out to Mr. Hart.
Quizzes now has an AI feature that will help you to generate quizzes. So like Kahoot, it's often got a bank that you can go to. You can search, I want a quiz on photosynthesis, and it'll show you all the quizzes that other teachers have already made, and you can just jump on the back of those. But it now, has AI features that allow you to generate questions. You can upload a worksheet or something that you already have, and it will use that to generate a quiz based on that content.
That is amazing. This is why it's a great time to be alive. I say often, what a time to be alive. A terrible time in lots of ways, but a great time. I love that so much.
Yeah, so its different AI features have an option for you to upload files or upload YouTube links or just like put in some custom text that you might have somewhere for it to use as a basis for generating a quiz. Where I think this could be really handy is if you have used ChatGPT or one of the other tools we've spoken about to create an informational text, or use ChatGPT to create some simple review questions. You could then copy and paste those questions really quickly, chuck it into the custom text generator in quizzes, and then it will turn it into like that gamification activity. So I guess ChatGPT, you could just copy and paste, print it out, do a paper multiple choice quiz. But if you wanted to do this more interactive version, copy and paste the output from ChatGPT and then put it into here, and the AI feature on quizzes will turn it into a game for you, which I just think is fabulous. And it will self-mark, which then means that the students get immediate feedback and, it's all around super helpful.
Yeah, that is amazing. Again, a labor-saving device. And I mean, if there's the option to make it a game, why not?
That's exactly right. The last one that we have had a dabble in is the AI features on Canva. I love Canva. I use it for almost everything. One of my colleagues actually walked past my desk the other day while I had like my dual screens both open, Canva doing different things. And she was like, what do you not use Canva for? Like, honestly, I love it. Can't use it enough. Canva has started using this like magic write tool.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So I've played around with it a little bit in terms of if there was a particular image or icon that I was really sort of visualizing in my mind, you can, sort of give it some text and it will try and generate some icons. And what I've noticed is that you can kind of give it feedback on, I like this is not what I'm asking for. And then it will sort of keep regenerating until it's got something close to what you're sort of picturing. So that can be really helpful, I guess, if you're trying to come up with a resource or a worksheet with a particular visual in mind that you can't source somewhere else.
Yes, I found that helpful when I want, because I'm not a graphic designer by any means. I don't use Canva nearly as much as you do, but I definitely do use it. And often I'm thinking, I want this specific type of border for this like certificate I'm making or whatever. And you can kind of click through a bunch of options that are all related to each other, but like the style or the aesthetic gets narrowed down increasingly as you click through the different recommended options. And I've actually been able to use that to find basically exactly what I was thinking of in my brain, which is really, really helpful. And I think is a really cool way to use AI so that your end product actually looks like what you were thinking of. I just think that's really cool.
Yeah. The other thing that I've used their sort of magic tools for is just for like quickly generating a presentation. I know that I can certainly get stuck going down the rabbit hole looking through all the templates that they have, which are, beautiful. But especially if you've got a particular theme or concept that you wanted a PowerPoint for. Not that I use slides, very much at all, really. But from time to time, it can be helpful. And so in their sort of design sidebar now, you can type in some words. So I'll say something, like design a presentation on renewable energy sources, and it'll whack together, a few slides with some, appropriate images and things in relation to the topic that you've said. But you probably need to, you almost definitely need to flesh out or make more appropriate the content that goes on those slides.
And it seems like that then it's kind of just like a place filler, like that Latin text that goes into like
Everything.
templates. Yeah. And it's just kind of showing you, hey, this is what you could use this for. You're making presentations as a teacher for a specific purpose anyway, and there's specific information that you want to impart on your students. So we trust your professional judgment.
Yeah, it really is just helpful, again, for getting over that initial writer's block or designer's block. Maybe when you're like, I want to do some slides and I want them to be a bit interesting and I want them to have this pictures in it. It just means that you don't have to go surfing the internet or surfing through all the template galleries to find exactly what you're looking for. So time saving and efficiency is really the crux of all these tools and how we find them useful.
Exactly. Yeah, it's such a relief for me personally to know that I can go basically to an idea generating machine and pick from some good starting points and then just get going. Like, I don't have to rely on my own brain, especially when it's like 8 o'clock at night on a Wednesday and I've had my staff meeting and I'm just exhausted, but I need to get whatever it is done. It just helps. It really does help.
Yeah. So if you've been a little bit concerned about AI or haven't been prepared to jump into that realm yet or haven't really known where to start, we hope that these tools give you some ideas on how you might really use these for your benefit. Because they really do make a lot of things easier. And, they're not a perfect solution and they're not the only thing that we should be relying on, but they can absolutely help us to do our job more efficiently, which gives us more time to do other things that we love to do, both in and outside of school.
And I think if we did this exact same podcast in a year's time, it would be completely different and we'd have made leaps and bounds in the quality and the capability of these kind of technologies. So it's just something that's going to evolve, and we and our teaching practice will have to evolve with it. But we're just learning new skills. You don't have to be scared. It's not out to get you, but you also don't have to use it. So if you don't want to, don't use it. But I love it, so I will use it.
Well, that does bring us to the end of this episode. We hope that you found it really helpful. Before we fully wrap up today, we just wanted to give a big shout out to Greer from Trauma Aware Ed. She's left us a beautiful review on Apple Podcasts. She's a super experienced educator and counsellor with a background in trauma aware education and has worked across a range of diverse settings in Queensland and the Northern Territory. She's become quite the expert in fostering inclusive environments and helping teachers to better understand and support students who have been affected by trauma. You can find her on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. So give her a follow if you haven't already, because I'm sure she'll have lots of helpful tips and tricks for you if you do.
And speaking of giving things a follow, you can check out our Instagram, which is @teachingtogether the podcast, and also check us out on Facebook. Make sure you hit follow on the podcast so that you don't miss an episode. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Podcasts. So we're basically everywhere you can find your podcasts. If you are an Apple Podcasts user, if you love us, we'd love you to give us a written review. That would be really helpful. Otherwise, give us some stars. We always love those. Bye.